Hi guys, this is your favorite Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast. Here comes the Spider-Cast. As usual, I am your co-host, Mike L., and I am joined by...
Joshua Mervell, and today we're going to be looking at a couple of comics with some Spider-Man special guest appearances. We're going to start off with 2 issues of Captain America, number 265 and 266, and then we're going to move on to Defenders 107.
That's right. And we have 2 very special guests this week. First, we have returning guest from the Comic Book Syndicate, G.I. Jolie. G.I. Jolie, say hi.
Hi.
Uh-oh.
That was very anticlimactic,
Yeah.
G.I. Jolie.
Well, I don't know. I get the same introduction all the time. It's just like, oh, okay. I mean,
Okay, what should I say instead?
We'll edit in like an applause soundtrack.
maybe.
Yeah. And for the first time ever on Here Comes the Spider-Cast, we have a special guest from our comic book graphic novel club in Windsor here. Say hello, special guest, and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name's Alicia LeBay, and I know Mike through Comic Book Club and Nerdy Book Club and all kinds of really fun, nerdy things.
That's right, and because most of us all of us in the world here are in quarantine, we're all looking for things to do, and so I'm trying to pack my schedule to have at least 2 podcasts per day, so I'm doing good so far. But anyway, okay, so yeah, Here Comes the Spider-Cast, we usually do chronological appearances of Spider-Man in his regular monthly books. However, this episode is another special one where we're going to cover some of the guest appearances we might have missed. And I apologize in advance for the low quality of these comics because I didn't realize how bad they were going to be until I read them yesterday. And the funny thing is I actually read 1 page of Defenders, then I messaged Alicia to apologize, and she was like, "Oh my God, thank God," because I thought I was the only one. And it was funny because she hadn't even read Defenders yet. She'd only read the Captain Americas, and I thought those were actually the good ones. So,
Oh, God.
So thankfully, we're going to start out with Captain America. Josh, do you want to tell us what this first issue of Captain America is about?
I guess so.
If you can.
Can you even?
Yeah, we start off the issue where Spider-Man sees Captain America get zapped to like another like location. He's kidnapped. So him and Spider-Man and Nick Fury team up to go try to find Captain America. And it turns out that Captain America was kidnapped by the Sultan. And his evil plan is to launch this rocket into the sky to destroy Washington, D.C., I believe it was. And then we find out, spoiler alert, I guess, if you really want to read this issue, but it turns out it was all a decoy, and the missile doesn't have any explosives in it. He really wanted to lift up an entire island, and that's what's going to explode. But they're also all on the island that's flying away. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure. Pretty much it's corny, evil, like, scientist plan. Like it's so stereotypical superhero story and like evil plan, and it's kind of not in the fun way. Like it's not even like corny in a good way. It's just boring, and you have to drudge through so much junk.
Right. You know, I don't have much to say about this. I'll just say that I agree, Josh. This is boring, cliched, and I've always wondered how this run was on Captain America by Mike Zeck, because I'm a big fan of his art. But I don't know if you noticed, but the stories by David Anthony Kraft, who did some of the comics we covered in Quasar Chronology, and I was not impressed with his writing there,
Right.
and I'm definitely not impressed with here. But I want to start off with our special guest, Alicia. Alicia, what was your impression of this comic, just going in completely blind?
Oh, God. It made me think of a small child playing with his action figures, because stuff was just coming out of left field. Mm-hmm. Things weren't making sense continuity-wise. Like, spoiler alert, Captain America jacks a drone's jetpack, and it's not strong enough for me and Spider-Man, but somehow we make it back onto the island. But then there's another jetpack that we could have had 2 jetpacks, but we only can use this one, even though there's jetpacks all around us. Like it made no sense. It made no sense, and it was just bad.
What about you, G.I. Jolie? What was your impression of this comic?
Oh, God.
Just
It was so painful to read. One, I read it in bed on a tiny mobile device. I was like, why is there so much dialogue?
Yes.
The dialogue is painful. The art is art. The story is non-existent. It was just so stupid. And I regretted every second of it.
You know, I actually want to cut in for a minute, and I'll tell you why. Because Mike Zeck, his interior art is never as good as his cover art, but I swear to Jesus, he is the best cover artist of the 1980s. You've probably, if you saw his art from Secret Wars #1 or G.I. Joe, you probably have recognized it because it's used for like merchandising and posters. So he's definitely one of the best. Like I said, his interiors are not as good, but I still think this interior art was pretty darn good.
Yeah.
I'll start with you, Josh. What did you think of the art?
I actually quite liked it. I especially liked the layout of a lot of the things, a lot of the pages. Some of the panels were really kind of like nicely shaped and had like, you know, different angles. One that kind of stuck out to me, there's this shot where Captain America's laying on the ground and Sultan is like up on this platform in the distance.
Yeah, I'm looking at that one right now.
I really like how the panel itself is like on an angle, almost like it's a Dutch tilt, and then the ground is Dutch tilted the opposite way a little bit, so like you can really tell that Captain America is really like discombobulated. He was just zapped through this phone booth. So like he's kind of out of it and doesn't really know what's going on. So I really love the layout of that panel. It's just small things like that I think that really worked in this issue. It's a bummer that the story and the dialogue didn't lend itself to that because things just are happening. So I don't think that the art is enough to save it for me. I did enjoy a lot of it, but it just I don't know.
Alicia, what did you think of this art?
This is one of my big complaints about a lot of the comics I've read. I shouldn't say a lot, that's a pretty generalized statement. But one of my biggest complaints about this one specifically is the faces were so small and scrunched up that everyone looked the same. Like, you didn't get depth from emotion, you didn't get... If it weren't for the costumes, everyone would look the same. Like, that's one of my biggest complaints. Another one is backgrounds. A couple of the scenes... maybe the scenes I'm complaining about specifically, maybe because it's fight scenes, they kind of whitewash the background or wash the background in just one color so that it doesn't take away from the fight scene. But that's another one of my complaints. I feel like the backgrounds were a little lacking. I would have liked to have seen a little more depth, a little more richness. But the art was okay. Like there were some good moments, like Josh was saying. But overall, it left something to be desired, definitely.
Okay, G.I. Julie, what do you think? Oh, go ahead, Josh. You're gonna say something?
Yeah, I was actually just gonna add on to that. I talk a lot on this show about how mostly with John Romita Jr. How he's really great at setting up a scene, and he shows you in like extreme detail the set and where everything is happening, and then afterwards the panel backgrounds are normally like a blank color because the background is no longer important. It's focusing on the story and what's being told in the action. But here we do get some of that, but I don't think that like everything is well established before they jump to those flat backgrounds. So it doesn't work because we still don't really know what's going on. It's like it's hiding what's happening in the action rather than like omitting it completely because it's not important, right? Like it just feels like it wasn't completely planned out from the start. So it was just orange background, green background, whatever it was. So yeah, I agree with you.
And Jolie, what did you think of the art?
Honestly, you can just skip me. I have nothing to say about this art. It's just so one note.
See, because I find... oh, go ahead.
I don't know. Like, I don't know what else can be said about it, I guess, is like a better contribution to the conversation. Like, I'm not there's nothing that is like revolutionary. It's not particularly like astounding. It's just art. it's just comic book art. You really notice when things are kind of out of whack. Like there's one panel where it's Nick Fury and he's like kicking a robot and his leg is so elongated that there's no way that is like the foreshortening is incorrect, and so is the anatomy in that case. Like it's all wrong. And it, yeah, that's it. It's just like the whole issue is just like an exercise in fight scenes, and it's boring.
Another really great awkward moment is when Captain America catches Spider-Man and he's flying off with him and his arms are extended in the most awkward pose I've ever seen. Almost like the artist was drawing it off of an action figure whose arms couldn't bend properly enough to display what he was trying to do.
See, the funny thing is I always found Mike Zack, one of the things he's a master at is like perspective and foreshortening, but I did notice, like I said, probably because this is an interior, that there were times when, like, out of nowhere, a person's head would be, like, 2 sizes too small, or their leg is 2 sizes too long, or... It's such a weird thing, like, if you are in a rush, what a weird thing to be rushing. Like, I didn't notice that the head was, the size of, like, tennis ball, It just... It's so out of place. And it's weird.
Normally in art, like, the head is, like, enlarged a little bit. Like maybe a little bit disproportionate to show the emotion because that's what everybody's focusing on. So it is strange that there's a lot of times where Spider-Man's head is like tiny, and especially with somebody like him that you really have to be careful with how you emote when you draw him because he's just like 2 big triangles on his head. That's really kind of all you get. So. I think that also might be why too sometimes this just feels like a big fight because we don't even really get much of an emotion of what's happening with the characters. We see them we see them like throwing punches, but we don't really see, or like without reading the dialogue at least, like what they're feeling.
Yeah.
Well, if that wasn't enough, we have another issue of Captain America by the same writer and same artist to talk about. So, G.I. Jolie, would you like to summarize this one really quickly?
Sure. I just need to open it to remind myself that it wasn't just fighting and robots. Oh, no, wait. It is just fighting and robots.
They're just flying through the air for 22 pages.
Yep. So I guess the island takes off. They're just, they are literally just flying through the air, being chased by robots wearing jetpacks. And there isn't really like a satisfying conclusion that I can recall or remember. I don't honestly remember what happens because I had lost interest. Like, while I was reading, I had to, like, stop myself and go, you don't even remember what you just read. You don't remember what you just read. Go back and read it again. So we have somehow a shirtless Nick Fury. Has he been shirtless this whole time? I don't know.
No,
I think he has been.
He has a some sort of, like, tool on his person in his right wrist. It's called the reverse cocoon or something like that, and all of his clothes burst off of himself and wrap around a robot that's holding him.
Oh, that is
the most
very
convenient
thing.
Yeah, I think that was the last issue that happened.
Okay, so he's opted not to burst, and he's in the control room in the mountain, in the rocket. I don't know. Oh no, wait. Yeah, he's in the missile, which is a, what do they call that? The not what is meant to be exploded. Okay, so what happens here? Oh, nothing. I honestly I don't remember how this ends.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Josh.
It's not really even really clear. They punch Sultan out and they stop the island from exploding. They jump off of the island and they're on the ground. The robots show up for like one more final confrontation, and they defeat them. Like nothing even really remarkable happens for them to defeat them. They just, I think Nick Fury shows up and shoots the last one that's about to kill Captain America, and that's it. They walk off into the sunset.
What happens is they attack oh shoot, what's his name? And they kill him. His consciousness is flying off. Nick Fury shoots the consciousness. Then when he dies, all the robots just stop, Phantom Menace style. And Nick Fury is like, I stopped the island and the missile and I saved everything off screen. And it's like, what? That's something a 9-year-old would do. What?
Yes.
I know.
They lived happily ever after.
And, you know, I also got to point out, for those that don't know, a lot of times in these days, writers and artists work from what was called the Marvel style, where the writer and artist would come up with a plot, then the artist would draw it, then the writer would go back and add the dialogue later. And there's an example on digital page 20 at the bottom left where they've just landed after crashing on the ground with his jetpack. And Spider-Man is brushing the dust off of his arm, and Captain America's putting the jetpack down. And this is the dialogue. Cap, next time we go out together, remind me to bring a parachute. Why are you taking off that jetpack, Cap? You need it to fly to a place with a phone so you can warn Washington. And the Cap's like, I would, but it's out of fuel. What the hell is that dialogue? Like, it's just over-explaining too much and just asking the wrong things. Ugh.
That was both of these issues, though. That was all of the dialogue, and it was so bloody exhausting. Like, that's why I checked out on the second page. And I just can't believe, like, it infuriates me that this is what they were publishing. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is what they expected people to read. It's not good.
You know, it's funny because they were reading it, because these were selling pretty well. This series, I mean, was one of their probably top sellers at the time.
God, it's fucking terrible.
That's
absolutely
crazy.
Yeah. But
you know what else I hate about this too is the first splash page that we get. It describes everything that happened last issue, and it catches the reader up to what's going on.
Yes.
And then like a few pages later, we have another full page recap of what happened last issue.
That's garbage.
Why?
Sorry.
The readers aren't stupid. You know, like even kids that are reading, kids are not stupid. If you give them, like, if you catch them up at the beginning of the issue, you don't need to stop and explain everything throughout and like re-explain. Like, they're not going to forget what they just read 3 pages ago.
I would even argue you don't need to catch them up. If you see them falling, you can figure it out as you go along.
Yeah.
You know? Like, that's the worst thing about all these 70s and 80s comics. And there's a lot of people that defend it, but there is no need to spoon feed it to the readers because the readers are smarter than this.
Yeah.
You were going to say, Jolie?
Well, no, it's just, why would you, and this is like, it's almost as if it's highlighting its own fallacies here. They're recapping, they take a page to recap nothing. So it's like, oh, okay, so you recapped everything that happened in the last 22 pages in one page. Better than when you actually wrote it into a book without dialogue. So these are technically, like, you're almost arguing for the non-existence of the issue that happened previously. And it's kind of terrifying. Like, don't they see that?
Well, the other thing too is so I want to talk about the characterization of Spider-Man, because this is only the 3rd time that we've reviewed comics outside the regular run. But Josh, I want to start with you. What do you think about Spider-Man's characterization here?
In the last 2
What
issues? Characterization?
He's
just a dude that's swinging.
Yeah,
but, like
there's nothing that you're right. There's nothing about him that makes him Peter Parker.
It could be anybody. Like he doesn't even really save anybody using his powers like a whole lot. Like not at least not in a way that some other hero couldn't do. Like he couldn't even save Cap when he was like falling down, like with his webs and swing down. Like
Spider-Man would easily be able to figure out a way out of it. Or
why isn't he
when they're coming towards the
why isn't he swinging
on the trees?
Yeah, through the trees, or grabbing onto the robots that have the jetpack. Why does Captain America need to hold him? Like, it's just I don't know. It's not Spider-Man. It's Spider-Man in name and look only.
Alicia, what did you think of Spidey?
He reminded me of a Scooby-Doo character, like the way his dialogue was written.
Okay.
I half expected him to say Jeepers at some point. Just, oh my God, Cap. What was that? Oh, let's explain it again. I'm good.
G.I. Jolie, what'd you think of Spidey?
He didn't really need to be here at all. His presence was absolutely unnecessary. I question why he was even there in the beginning. Because it's a Captain America story. Just like them shoehorning all the other characters into these team ups. They just shoehorn Spider-Man into this book, and it's kind of not useful. It's like 100%. It's 100% not useful. He could have done this on his own. He didn't need Spider-Man at all.
Yeah, I think it muddies up like the dialogue and like the action and everything that's going on too. Because like, okay, going back to the example that Mike had earlier about some of the dialogue being awful with Cap throwing down the jetpack. Like if Spider-Man wasn't there, you could have just
Josh.
Oh, hello. I can hear you guys.
Josh there. Josh, are you there? We can't hear you.
I can hear you.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you for a second.
Weird.
We couldn't hear you.
I could hear you, guys.
We lost you at throwdown.
Okay. When he threw down the jetpack, we could have just had Cap say like one little line about shit out of fuel, and then that's it. Like that's all of the storytelling you need, right? We have to have
right.
Golly gee, why don't you take your jetpack and fly on down to Washington?
God.
Sorry, son, I'm out of fuel. Looks like we're gonna have to. It's like come on, like it's just
bad. It's bad. Anyone could write better.
Yeah.
Than this.
You know what? Spider-Man is in this story what most female characters are like in male protagonist films.
That's a very good point.
Window dressing?
Yeah. He's just there to advance, not even advance plot. He's just there to accentuate Captain America and Nick Fury. That's it.
Yeah.
So
it does feel like in this issue and in the previous one, they're saying, you like Spider-Man, right? Well, here he is. You'll love this then. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You're a girl, right? You'll love this character. She's the girl.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it definitely feels like that.
So we just read Captain America 265 and 266 by David Anthony Kraft and Mike Zack. Do we recommend these comics? Alicia, I'll start with you. Do you recommend these comics, and will you read them again?
No. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your money. Just don't. And for God's sake, if you're new to comics, do not start with these ones.
Oh, no.
G.I. Jolie, what about you? Do you recommend these?
I argue that you should never read these. These should be forgotten in the annals of comic time. Oh, God. I'm sorry. I'm just so annoyed by them.
I hear you. Joshua Mervell, what about you? You going to read these again?
I will not read these again. No. I don't recommend anybody pick them up. They're not worth it.
I agree. The only thing I can recommend is flipping through them for the art, because like I said, I do like Mike Zeck's art, but the story is terrible. Right. Do not read these. Don't read any more comics. But unfortunately, I'm sorry, David Anthony Kraft, but these are not good.
Yeah. I feel like you could. I feel like you could skim through them and get the same thing out of it as if you sat down for.
I'll tell you. If I'm reading a comic and the story's bad but the art's good, I will just stop reading it and just look at the art, because usually in Bronze Age comics the art is on average better than the story, so I think that's a-okay. But anyway, okay, so guys, guess what? If that wasn't bad enough, we're now going to jump to an even worse comic. Defenders number 107 by our pal J.M. DeMatteis from Marvel Team Up. And artist Don Perlin, who I know most from doing Bloodshot, of all things. Oh. G.I. Jolie, would you like to tell us what happens in this? Oh, no, sorry. You already did the last one, so Josh. Wait, who? No, sorry, Alicia. It's Alicia's turn. Okay, Alicia, can you please tell us what happened in this comic?
So, this comic was fluff and filler. Like it starts with two characters dying, and it's so forgettable that I can't even tell you. I remember one was Valkyrie, but I can't even remember who the other one was that died. They didn't even show him. So Valkyrie died, and then they held a funeral, and Hellcat was really upset that two people had died. And I feel like they were trying so hard to be profound with this and be like, we're going to impart some wisdom. And it's like, no, stop. Like, Hellcat was being unreasonable. That is not... fuck.
She was being an hysteric woman.
Yeah. Nobody behaves that way.
No.
Nobody behaves that way. So anyway, then Hellcat sees Valkyrie's ghost. And then that's where it ends. They hold a seance. And I laughed my ass off when we saw that. Like, Hulk holding hands, and they're all sitting around in this circle having this seance. And I just couldn't believe this is happening. And then that was it. Nothing happened. It was awful. There was lots of description where there shouldn't have been because show don't tell. Like, it was just terrible.
The thing is J.M. DeMatteis is the regular writer on Marvel Team Up, which Josh and I read every week, and Jolie's read a few now in a row. Jolie, do you see the same problems here of just really overdone exposition? And like, what is your opinion on this story? What do you think?
It's the same garbage that he's been pumping out for Marvel Team Up. It's like, how many of these how many of these beings can I stuff in a room? How about all of them, including Son of Satan? I honestly want to know who Kyle is, though.
I need to know who Kyle is.
Like, who the fuck is Kyle, though?
I think it was so funny without context that they're talking about Kyle. It's just such a normal name. And then the Son of Satan shows up like, oh man, Kyle died? No. Not Kyle.
Not Kyle.
Even Hellcat was like, oh my god, Son of Satan, when did you get here? It's like, girl same. Like, what? Who? What? Oh. And then they, like, not only do they shoehorn everybody in, then they have a seance, and then they gather.
Oh my god!
And then they gather in upstate New York to shoehorn 6 more people in. Like, what are you doing? What are you thinking? There is you've lost the plot. There's nothing happening.
It's just
nothing.
But I also love how on page 18, original page 18, Son of Satan's like, Doctor, if that is indeed the Valkyrie's soul trying to communicate with us, there's only one thing to do. I know, Damon. We must attempt a seance. Like, it's just, come on. This is the Marvel universe. You guys have been to hell and back. You've been to other dimensions. But why do you need to do a freaking, like the subplot of like a bad 70s horror, you know? Like, I have a seance.
They're going to get a Ouija board out.
It's just so mundane.
I rolled my eyes so hard that they got stuck. Like, I was just like, what? What?
And not only do they have to have a seance, but they need to have Thor there because of the hammer. And they need to have him join Son of Satan when they actually have a freaking sorcerer in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like, Doctor Strange is the Sorcerer Supreme.
Yeah.
Josh, you might know more about this than me. Is he the Sorcerer Supreme of Earth or the universe? Because isn't it the universe? Like, why do they need to do a freaking seance?
I think so. Yeah, I think he's the Sorcerer Supreme in general. So I don't know. I guess at this time he is the Sorcerer Supreme.
Yeah, he is. Okay. It's like he might as well have said, we need to do a card trick. You know, something so mundane.
The tarot deck.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, cut this deck twice and pick out any number.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you have the Son of Satan there. Like, he has exclusive channels to the underworld that I'm sure the Sorcerer Supreme doesn't have. Like, what the fuck are you doing a seance for, people? Like on digital page 13, when they're actually doing the seance, my favorite part of this whole book is like Daredevil just kind of like screaming in shock in the background. He's not even supposed to be able to see any of this shit. Like, what? I don't understand. I don't know.
Well, what about, I love that part when Son of Satan is like, wait, where's the part here? I gotta find it. It's funny. When he goes, if there is indeed a Prince of Evil, there must also be a Lord of Love.
Oh my God, no.
I had forgotten.
Somebody's been reading like Spinal Tap lyrics here. This is ridiculous. Okay, I also want to point out, like one of the things about, you know, tragedy is if you have like too many tragic things in a row happen, it becomes comical. And this exactly is exactly what happens. We open up with the death of Kyle, who, by the way, was Nighthawk. That's another superhero. Right. So he's just died. Then 1, 2, 3 pages later, 4 pages later, Valkyrie gets killed. So they're already mourning someone, and then she gets shot in the back. It's at this point it becomes comical, right?
Right, and she then, just dies from some dude popping up underneath a rock or something and shooting her with a literal gun. Like,
I know it's not like it's a magic gun. It's just a freaking revolver. It's ridiculous. Yeah. And then I love this shot of them all standing there looking down in shock. Oh, how is she, guys? Is she? Oh no! And then Hellcat. No! That is garbage frame. Like, look at Valkyrie just face down like Greg the Hammer Valentine. There's no drama to this design. Like, it's fucking garbage. Yeah. And by the way, I want to take this opportunity to point out this is some of the worst professional art I have ever seen. Alicia, what do you think of this art?
Well, I'm going to rehash my complaint about the last one with just the faces are so small. So again, we're having these descriptors like when Hellcat was screaming in despair. It's describing her. For God's sake, they're describing her screaming in despair as it's happening. If you would have shown her face and drawn it properly, instead of describing the agony in her eyes, you would have gotten it on the page, and that would have translated to the reader so much better. But instead, like you said, it just adds to the hilarity of it.
Yeah, I don't know what's worse, or what adds to the hilarity is that not only do they draw or render her agony, they describe it as narration, and then they have her describe it as she's writing in her journal. Like, is this a joke? This must be a joke.
Dear
they must
diary.
think that we're stupid.
Dear diary,
here's another
Kyle died today, and I'm sad.
Here's another one, and I don't have the page number because I screenshotted it, but we have Doctor Strange floating down some stairs, and there's these 2 blue rectangles, and it says Doctor Strange slides down the stairs gracefully, his cloak of levitation spreading wide behind him. His face is serene, almost otherworldly. The room itself seems to grow brighter for his presence. And it's like, you could have drawn that in so many different ways. Like, the descriptions almost read like storyboards. For the artist to give them ideas for what to draw. But instead, they crapped out, and so they had to include the storyboards in the story in order to get the point across.
See, like, James DeMatteis, it's like he knows how to write dialogue, and he does know how to write description, but he doesn't know the proper place to use it and to not use it, and how to use it, you know? It's like it's like a good guitar player that doesn't know how to write a song. That's what he's like to me, you know?
He needs an editor. He needs someone to slap his hand and say, no.
The pace is always off, too.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of the premises he comes up with are interesting. Like having a character die and going through the mourning process of superheroes is a like fun idea and genuinely be interesting. But it feels like he doesn't get past that stage where he comes up with a really cool idea for a story, and he just kind of throws it together to be like, okay, well, I guess I gotta make them mourn, so she cries
and writes in her diary.
So it's just, okay, well, if you were to have ripped off the cover of this issue and handed it to me, I would have thought it was a Marvel team up.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because that's exactly how it feels. It really feels like none of the characters belong in this story. Like, whose story is this? Like Hellcat maybe, but she doesn't. Yeah. We don't really even follow her much. Like, she's just kind of there upset, right? It's just so strange. It's not even really about Valkyrie or Nighthawk. It's just all of these characters all mashed up together to kind of tell you that 2 of them died and now one of them's back as a ghost. There's no characters. There's just props to move this weird narrative forward. You
know, and I do want to point out one thing, though, is that now that I'm looking at the Defenders and Captain America side by side. The one thing I'll say is this comic is, at the very least, more enjoyable to make fun of because there's a lot more going on, like a lot more happening. Whereas like the other one is just like a dumb action story. At least this is like it's like a bad B movie, but at least there's more to it. You know, it's like there's a lot of ideas. Like, you know, they jump around from Asgard to here to there, so that's kind of cool. I like there are some good ideas in it, but it's just such a slog to get through. You know,
right?
Yeah.
And like the art is so bad that again it kind of makes it more fun to talk about. I want to talk about one more page before we wrap up. If you guys can go to Digital 8 or Original page 7. I'm not sure if you still have it on your phone, Alicia. Oh. But there's a page where Beast is talking to Hellcat and Gargoyle, and it's like there's an establishing shot that's a disaster where like the characters are not really separated from the background. Then there's a shot of Beast with all this empty space on the right. And then you think of all the places to stick the speech bubble, you'd put it there. But instead they cover up half of his elbow and like his stomach. Why? What is that big empty space for? Unless there was a bubble there that they erased. I just don't understand the thought behind leaving all that blank. And then the next 3 panels, it's like, it's really just the same angle, kind of just a little bit closer. It's just really poorly designed. I don't know. And there's a lot of that throughout this comic. Mm-hmm. I think this art, I mean, I've defended Don Perlin before, but I grew up with his art on Transformers and I thought it was terrible. And I got to say, this reminds me why I didn't like him. Like, I think this art is really bad. But anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that I only recommend this comic if you want to read this ironically and you want something to make fun of or to laugh at. But otherwise,
but don't do it alone.
I do not see my... No,
don't do it alone.
Do it with a group of people. Yeah, do it with a group of people. Yeah. But I would not recommend anyone read this. Alicia, what do you think?
No. Don't do it. Just don't.
Don't do it? Not even for fun?
I mean, do it for fun. Definitely do it for fun. That's like you said, it kind of enters that B-grade horror movie realm. Like, make it into a drinking game, you know?
Yeah.
Every time there's a really long description, then take a shot.
You'll
time
die
somebody
of
says
alcohol
Kyle.
poisoning.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to start incorporating some of these drinking game ideas into our podcast.
That could be really fun.
Idea.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. G.I. Julie, are you going to recommend this comic to anyone?
If you've got like 1.5-inch buttons to make, sure. Just there's a lot of great little solo heads that you can punch out that work really well in that size template. So yeah, go ahead,
you know
crafters. What? It's a crafter's delight.
I want that seance as a giant button.
Hey, you know what? That would be great.
Joshua Mervell, are you going to recommend this to anyone or read it again?
I don't think so. And unless I've got some alcohol in front of me, I don't think I'll be picking this one up again.
I'm going to give... This could be the worst episode, like the worst collection of comics we've done. Because we've definitely had a few hit and miss, but usually they're balanced out. But all 3 of these are pretty bad.
Yeah.
So there's really... This is the only episode where there's nothing to recommend, I think, right?
No.
Yeah. Well, guess what? I got some good news because in our next when we do our next Spidey crossover episode, we got another issue of Defenders to review. Can you believe it?
Oh God!
Because this story continues, so hopefully,
hey,
some
Mike,
of you will be back for that. Yeah,
I quit.
That's it. Josh is out.
This is going to be my last episode of your Ghost and Spider casting.
I'm going solo. All right. Yeah, it's funny because I thought doing guest appearances would spice things up, but we can definitely see. I mean, let's be clear. I think earlier,
all of
Alicia
your friends mad.
Yeah, but you guys were talking about how like the writers must have thought that this is what kids wanted. Well, clearly they're doing a much better job in Spider-Man because those are a lot better written and drawn. So there's a reason that Spider-Man was, number 1 or number 2 at the time, and Cap was probably mid-range seller because this is, and Defenders was eventually canceled, so obviously it was not very good, right? So
oh, no.
Yeah.
Woof.
So anyway, on that note, I would like to thank G.I. Jolie and Alicia for joining us. I'm sorry the comics weren't better.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Hopefully,
Maybe next time.
hopefully, Alicia, we can have you back on again. G.I. Jolie, I'm sure you'll be back on again soon, right?
Yeah, I don't have
as
anything
long
going
as it's
on.
not to read that Defenders.
Yeah, I feel
can't
feel like
get
we might
behind
scare off
anyone.
Jolie.
I can't get behind anyone that doesn't keep more than 7 books on a bookshelf, okay? Page 9.
Anyway, and Josh, hopefully you haven't quit the show because we got more Spider-Man comics to review every week. And Josh, you can take it from here.
All right. We want to keep having this conversation with you, and we want to know what you guys think about the issues that we're reading and then the podcast itself. So check us over at Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Facebook, wherever you can find podcasts. You'll find us there at the Comic Book Syndicate. We do also have a new Twitter account, correct, Mike?
That's right. You want me to talk about it?
Yeah. Do you have? Sorry, I actually don't have the username in front of me right now.
Yeah, no problem. It's Here Comes the Spider-Cast, but the short form is HCT Spider-Cast with no hyphen.
Cool.
So check it out for now. That's a great way to communicate with us, give us feedback, give us requests, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of fun there.
Yeah, we want to keep that conversation going.
That's right. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. And next week we'll be back to our regularly scheduled collection of monthly Spider-Man comics. So until Monday, this has been Here Comes the Spider-Cast.
All right, see you then.